right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of the Single Parent Daily Podcast with your hosts,
Chady Denmark
and Evan DeMarco. I have to be honest, our next guest is intriguing for so many reasons, but most importantly, one of them was when I was about 26, I was with my ex-wife. Maybe it was a little bit after that. The time is not important, but we're visiting her family in Minneapolis, and her cousin comes to the house, and he pulls up in his brand new minivan. And this is like a 32-year-old man with 2 kids, and he starts extolling the virtues of the minivan.
Oh my God.
And I remember thinking, the only way that this happened, right, a grown man talking about a minivan with such a bomb, was that he had to have put a down payment on that minivan using his testicles. It was the only conceivable way that was going to happen. And subsequently, no person has ever convinced me that the acquisition of a minivan, especially by a man, does anything less than require the down payment to be in your testicles. That, I think that, Dodge or Ford or whoever keeps them in a little mason jar in some back room. In fact, my neighbor, he had their second kid. They bought a minivan, and he starts talking about, it's like, oh, you can open the door with the remote. And I'm like, that's not that cool. But all of that aside, our next guest, Jill, lessons from the minivan.
Yes.
So clearly, I don't think you had to, buy a minivan using the down payment, the aforementioned down payment. But your Instagram is hilarious. You're a no BS kind of person. But we're so excited to have you on the show. And I think just talk to us about lessons from the minivan, where that came from, who you are. Who is Jill?
Thank you so much for having me. I am completely honored, and I'm blown away, to be seen as anybody's superhero. So that makes me feel really good. Thank you. I started writing, I guess I've always been writing because I'm an attorney, so we write, and I was not a litigator. I did legal research and writing, but I had wanted always to be a journalist, and I've always kind of done creative writing. But what ended up happening was as my kids got older, a funny thing happens because half the time as they approach teenage years, they talk and seem like adults. And then the other half are having a big mood. But when they talk and seem like adults, it seems like you can have this conversation with them. And I've been a single mom for a really long time. I'm saying it that way. I was so exhausted to even date for a while, but now I'm ready and he's not falling out of the sky. So, but what happened was I was, basically like complaining to my kids about stuff, and, they didn't want to hear it. And I was like, I need people to talk to that go through this. And I live in New England. I live in Vermont. I'm from Long Island, so I'm chatty and extroverted. And with the combination of the spread between my children's ages, where a lot of I was friends with parents of their friends, and they've moved on and left Vermont, and then coupled with it's not an extroverted place. It's, quiet, keep to yourself place. I didn't have anybody to talk to besides blabbing to my kids. So I just, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I have a few friends, but, I was a single mom with them at home, and they seemed like they could handle some conversations. I'm not even talking about any intimacy conversations, just like bills or things you worry about. And then turns out later, that's too stressful, and that was not right on my part. So I started writing for myself, really just like into the void. That's how this started. I didn't tell anybody except my youngest child because I needed her to help navigating Instagram and sometimes coming up with memes. So the one that's going to be 14, my other 2 don't even know I run it. Hardly any of my friends know. I only know probably 10 people on there in real life. And I have made amazing friends. People I may not have met in real life, but have your back at 3 a.m, are there to talk to you. And it became very cathartic, not just for me to write, but for me to be helping others, especially when I've crossed that path of the journey and survived.
Yeah.
So that's the fun part. The name lessons from the minivan, that came. I did not sell my testicles. I will tell you, my ex-husband probably felt like he was. He's very much a car guy. And we didn't get a minivan until after we had 2 children and we were driving Saabs. And then when we moved from Northern Virginia to DC, Northern Virginia, and then up to Vermont, I was having to dress and undress the kids in the car seats. When they're like I don't know how cold you guys get, but when they're bundled at all, the car seat doesn't fit right. And then you have to unbuckle.
Not that
Adjust the seatbelts. Yeah.
They have to adjust the seatbelt, but it won't. But these kids are wearing thick winter clothing. You've got to take it off. And I'm standing outside in the cold, taking it off and swearing my head off. So with child number 2, they're 22 months apart. I'm like, I'm done. When we move to Vermont, I'm done. We need a minivan. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care. I'm not driving for glamour. And if you're still driving around a sports car, you know, you got to make room for the kids. But it is really great because they can walk around in that aisle. It's also a pit of toys and food. And I didn't take pride in my minivan the way I did in my Saab. Let's put it that way. So that's part of the joke as well. And the lessons part comes, there's really no one more invisible than a parent driving around. The kids talk to each other in the back, or they talk to their friends. They forget you're there unless they want a snack. And so I'm
Yeah, you know what? I especially teenagers, you're their Uber driver, you're their slave.
Yep.
They're slave. You work for them.
You totally work for them, and they're not even nice.
No, so rude. I'm like, this is I want my money back.
I've been in friends who have kids minivans, and I swear I found a Cheerio older than me.
Ugh.
Oh, you definitely did. Definitely.
Yeah.
I did change from a minivan. I don't actually have one anymore. I have a Jeep. And in between, I had a Yukon XL Denali, one of those big, huge things, because my kids skied. I had 3, huge thing with a TV in it. I'm 5'1". I needed a running board to get on it. I love that freaking thing. You can drive through anything.
Yeah,
But
I have an Escalade, and so I don't need the space. But my daughter, you know, every time I want to get rid of it, everyone's like, "Oh, but your daughter does sports, and you know, you'll need the space." And I'm like, "No, because then everybody wants to go in my car, and then I end up driving everyone."
You drive,
yeah.
Yeah. But it's nice,
So
you know.
the ages. You have a 14-year-old, and are they all girls or?
So my oldest is a boy. He graduated from college in Houston. He went to Rice University in Houston. He graduated last May, and he works in San Francisco. He's an engineer. So I'm already.
Is he the 22-year-old helping your 9th grader with homework?
Yeah. Yeah, he is. Isn't that awesome? So they're 8 years apart. He turned 23 in March, and then the one right under him is a girl, and she's 21, and she goes to school in Southern California, Chapman. So I'm California dreaming
home now, because now there's no colleges. Like they're like kicking them out of the dorms.
It's terrible. Yeah. Well, so she's a junior, and I don't know how much Chapman has for on-campus housing. Freshman year she was on. Sophomore year she moved off with a friend, and she lucked out because one of the friend's parents, it's 5 kids, but the parents decided to buy a home for an investment for themselves. So it's not like there's a traditional landlord kicking them out. And now she's a junior, and they've all just continued school there online, which is good for everybody, because no 21-year-old wants to be home with their parents. It's pretty rough, right? And I don't really want her home, frankly. It's rough.
I love you, but stay there.
That's awesome.
Stay there. It feels the same way about me. She gets, you know, and it isn't that I love you, but stay there. But it's like, if you have to come home during a quarantine to Vermont where it's freezing, where you can't see your friends and you can't do anything, or you'll continue living in the house. There's 3 boys and her and another girl in this whole house that just quarantined together.
Yeah,
that was
like,
you know,
way better experience.
Way better. And then my son in San Francisco, he's working, and he I think was sent home in February, way before you guys had lockdown, just because they could see it coming, to telecommute. Mm-hmm. So, and he lives in San Francisco with friends from college. So they both have really good, fun lives. And the youngest one is like, why do I have to be here with you? Why am I stuck here with you?
She's the only one stuck with you. Yeah, my daughter is the same. She's the only child. So she's over us. She's so done with like the online school, and but this is an interesting time to be a single parent. Yes. We were talking earlier that, especially for teenagers, not only, I think all ages, it's just I mean, we're not only busy as trying to keep the fort up. But we're now teaching our own kids, because he has the kindergartner, but you constantly have to stimulate them now. If not, because our kids are going to be like on their phones, TikToking all the time,
Right.
or who knows, Snapchatting and
that's
other that they're doing. And we have to like entertain them to.
My daughter asked me the other day if she felt my portfolio was balanced enough during this economic crisis.
Oh, good.
I'm kidding. She didn't ask me.
Oh my, wow.
She asked me if she could watch videos again for the 12 millionth time. And it's like, it's that meme. It's the one where like, I'm so excited. I just finished Netflix. Like that's like, that's what's wrong with this.
The season.
It's crazy. And when you have bad weather and you can't even go, you know, like if it's pouring all the time, these are weird months in Vermont. We don't really get spring fully or budding. So then you're really in the house. And, you know, I describe myself anyway as having mommy burnout with number 3. And it's like, whatever. I mean, for a younger kid, I can imagine thinking, oh, you know, the screen time, I should be doing better. But how can you possibly do better?
I know Southern California is different because we get to go outside. And you guys are locked up. You guys are really having cabin fever, like a whole different level.
Majorly, to a whole different level. And I will say, like with my teen, I think that her age group, and your daughter's in 8th grade. So this, like 7th through 10th, or whenever you guys kids can drive, we can drive, our children can drive at 16 here. But if you can't even drive a car and you already think you're independent, know everything, but now you are stuck with your mom, you know, or your dad, or both, it's sort of torture because you can't even get go for everybody.
Yeah, I was living with my mom now as a grown woman, and imagine I'm not staying at her house right now during the quarantine, but I would lose my mind because I have my mom, my grandmother. I have 4 generations in the house. I was
4 generations of Latino women.
4 generations of Latina women. It would exactly.
I'm not sure I want to go.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be a lot of home cooked meals. If anything, that's a good thing. But I'm very blessed that I've been able to quarantine elsewhere, and my mom and my grandmother both have emphysema. But during this crazy quarantine time and COVID, and you know, I think that I've been able to go outside at least with my daughter. I'm thankful for that, and do activities with her, like doing bike rides, or she's on her board, and there's a lot of outdoor activities. But I can sympathize with you guys. I can't even imagine if I couldn't even go outside.
We're looking forward to, like today we had sun, it was 47, but to a Vermonter, it's fine. We can go, that counts. Our state is opening on Friday though, so it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. So
so here's the thing, we could talk about this all day long, and I think the challenge is that almost every conversation in the universe right now is about this damn virus. And to that extent, I'd like to nudge this more onto something that's, I don't know, not Corona. And so when we talk about, you obviously have a very humorous way of dealing with all things, and I think it's fantastic. Guys, Lessons from a Minivan on Instagram, follower, it's hilarious. But let's talk a little bit about your story. You're an author, you're a lawyer, a psychologist, is that right?
I have a BS in psychology, and then I went to law school. So that's just the undergraduate degree. I feel like I used that with my kids, but I never practiced. I never got an advanced practice.
Well, as a parent, you are a social worker.
Totally. And sometimes a prosecutor.
Yes.
So, I know you said you kind of really did a lot of you did so many different things, the CV of such impressive accolades, but it was because of your kids. So kind of tell us, give us the backstory. How did you end up a single parent?
Okay. So, I feel like I have 2 answers to this, because there's the before, and then there's on reflection, I can see all the mistakes that happened. There's when you're going through it. I met my ex-husband in law school. I was 22. I went straight from college, home to college to law school, and always had boyfriends. And the second part of the story is I probably should have taken some time to figure myself out and do all the things I had to do later on. But we met in law school, and it was a very intense, the highs are really high, the lows are low later I learned about narcissism. But at the time, the highs were really good. And so even if you had told me, if someone had a crystal ball telling me that this is what's going to happen, I don't think I ever would have believed you at that age. So we met. He's a couple years older. We got married and moved to DC. I was working, we were working in different places, but both attorneys. And then after we got married, which was in 1995, I'm pretty old. When we got married, we decided to have our own law firm. That's how much we liked each other. We wanted to just hang around together all day and crack each other up. And so we did that, pouring all our, that wasn't what broke us up. What broke us up really was the stress of having unplanned kids after you've got a bit. So we poured all our money to start a business in May of 95. And then there was a tragedy in my family. My brother was killed in a car accident, which is a whole different thing, but in November, which put a lot of stress on your marriage, even though you don't realize it at the time, because there's this whole tragedy, you can't function well. And then I got surprisingly pregnant with Alex, 22-year-old, which was fine. We thought, hey, we own our own law firm. We'll just bring the kids to work with us. You cannot do.
Oh yeah, this is that easy.
Yeah,
But
that's the
Like
plan.
bringing a bag of potato chips.
Yeah,
This
is exactly what you don't understand, right? We were just like the teens that would talk to somebody. We're going to do it this way. It's our way. It's our law firm. We can decide. You know, we were on a shoestring budget anyway. But we had him, and things were going along okay. And then after, when he turned 1, I got pregnant on the pill with the next one. And that really just, I think that's where things just derailed, because 2 kids, 22 months apart. I have some autoimmune diseases. One of them is ulcerative colitis. So I got really, really ill, especially with the second child. And we ended up having to kind of close up shop and move to his hometown where his parents could help us, or my hometown, you know, one of the two, because we weren't managing with 2 small children and a law firm and health issues. So when we got here, I always thought that it was temporary, because we had moved around lots of other places, but there was something that happened with him when he got here and he was working for his dad, where he really, you could visibly see him regressing. I didn't know him as a child, but our relationship changed from there, and it just all went downhill. It was like we didn't have that same friendship or partnership. And then I tried for a really long time to stay put, and there was a lot of fighting. And one of the things that happened was I became very devalued as a person. So I have this big CV, and it would have been nice if I could make money too, but anytime I would need him to cover, his job was super important and he refused. So there were lots of arguments about that. And then things just really, really disintegrated. We stayed too long. I separated in 2008. We got back together. Then a year and a half apart, separated for good. And it has been a long, vicious ride. Because he didn't ask for the divorce. He cheated and did a lot of bad things, but he didn't want the divorce. And so I have had to pay for, emotionally pay for it. And so what happened with my career and my kids is I was always the full-time mom at home, but I all of a sudden had no free time, because he went out and dated and had a whole life and would take one kid here and one kid there, never all 3 at the same time. And I was like always soothing my kids instead of making them go. And it was more like, my oldest was in 8th grade. It was like, oh, okay, if he's not going to take you, fine, you know, just be home. But that curtailed my personal life and my ability to really work, especially with health issues. And so I just felt like I spent a lot of years putting out fires and just treading water in a whirlpool that I was drowning in, just kind of keep coming up for air. And I couldn't see the bigger picture until much later, until my oldest kids were really out, where I could say, okay, mommy's a person. I'm not going to be super mommy anymore. And then my teen is like, yeah, you're not super mom, you know, whatever rude thing she wants to say back. But, you know, the mommy is a person theme, where I met a lot of other women who have struggled. Some have struggled right from the beginning, you know, with postpartum depression or toddler issues. And I just relate to that mood, that helpless feeling.
Yeah. Did you feel like you lost your identity having the children at the time, and then all of a sudden his title, which was the same as yours, it's all about him and you gotta be the caregiver. And even taking care, you know, him taking the kids one at a time, you continue to not have your identity.
I completely, not only did I lose my identity, but part of the reason that we got divorced, there's a few reasons, but one of them, and cheating wasn't even the big one. I mean, that was like an aside. One of them was that he really started becoming very pompous about being an attorney, and I wasn't. And that was so weird because of course I am, but then I wasn't working. But then I couldn't, when you try and get daycare and then the schools are off at certain days or certain times, I was always the fallback person. So I became a professor, but it was adjunct. And he was very demoralizing to me about no matter what I was doing. And I spent a lot of time saying, hey, but this is great because, or look, this is going to work out well because. I didn't understand that it was more about asserting control rather than a specific issue. But I did feel like I lost my identity. I really enjoyed being a mom, especially in Virginia with a play group and here. And I felt like it was important for me to let them come home after school rather than being stuck in daycare on his days. Because my mom would stay at home, but my mom didn't go to college. So it's sort of different with, I have all these pedigrees and things I could be doing, but I'm being pulled in 3 different directions and battling. It was a very bad divorce. So
Jill, I think one of the things that we hear a lot with people going through divorce, and I don't know if it's just this day and age, but you brought up narcissism. And I don't know if that's a function of him being an attorney or just how people are these days, but we do hear a lot of listeners talking about what it's like to be in a relationship with a narcissist. And I'd love your advice on, you know, what steps can people take either to extricate themselves from a relationship like that, or to even, now that you've had a chance to reflect on it, do you feel there's anything that you could have done to have made the relationship work?
I couldn't have made the relationship work. So people do throw around the term narcissism, and they throw it around like, oh, he thinks he's so great. It's so much more than that. It's a cluster B personality disorder where, so he's used our children as pawns. I've had issues with our kids because he's used them as pawns. At the same time, he'll take me to court and accuse me of exactly what he's doing in front of his colleagues. It is so mean and calculated. And so one of the reasons that I was unable to explain like, hey, this will be really good, or we'll be making this much money, or isn't this great, is because a narcissist doesn't have empathy. And there are lots of different red flags that I absolutely should have known. And it's interesting because they do teach these in high school now. So in high school, they teach about abuse, which I'd never learned, but they also teach about what red flags to look for. And earlier I said that one of the things that was so great was I felt so swept off my feet and so saved and so worshiped. That's a major red flag. If somebody just comes into your life and just falls head over heels for you or buys you expensive things, that's a red flag because they don't even know you. Mm-hmm. So I think that if people, because everything you see in the movies sort of promotes a woman being
yeah,
and codependency. You complete me.
What? Codependency. So codependency is something I recently, I didn't know that this was narcissism. A couple of years after we separated, I watched the movie, did I read, or I think I watched the movie Gone Girl, or I read the book and then watched the movie. Have you seen this book or heard of it?
Yeah.
I can text it to you. But it's really about this, the woman is nuts and she fakes her own death and and pins it on the husband. She's not dead. And in the end, he goes back with her. It's this whole race of like craziness. And then he goes back with her because they're in love, which is really a codependent addiction to another person. And so the codependency piece I learned about later. Have you ever heard of the book Codependent No More?
Great book.
No, I need to
absolutely
read that.
Great book.
But what do you think? What do you think brings someone to, attract that? Like, what attracted you to that? Knowing what happened, because I studied NLP, and I know from just my trauma therapy and childhood experiences, mine obviously were daddy issues, but you think back, and I think all of it stems from something that happened that we are attracted to that.
For both of us, because I can now see red flags and I just keep walking. I can see them a mile away and I would just keep walking. Two things. One is, I think both our childs, he's had specific events happen in his childhood where when you go back, you can see, okay, there's where he broke. Horrible things. And then there's where he broke and it was ever put back together. For me, I didn't study abnormal psychology. I focus a lot on addiction and linguistics. So I might have taken one abnormal class. And narcissism is also a form of sociopath. There's bipolar and I meant borderline personality. They're also on that sort of spectrum. But when you think of somebody dangerous, you think of a knife-wielding psycho. And that's not what I went through. The reason he was so attractive to me, or his personality was that I was very anxious myself, and I was very high functioning anxious. And here he was giving me that big hug that stopped the shaking, literally and, metaphorically. And it was like I came to need him. And that's what a narcissist does. They move you away from your friends and family. They slowly, isolate you. So you're just with them. You give up lots of different things. The partnership is no longer there. And you really believe you'd be lost without them. So there's that. And then the other major red flag is that he didn't have any long-term friends. And
it's a huge one.
But at 22, you don't really think that. And I was in law school where people were sort of weird anyway, but people didn't like him. But I liked him. And I was like, oh well. Where I have friends, from high school still, from college, from my daughter is friends with my college best friend's daughter. They're best friends. And they live in Atlanta. So now I feel like I have to do a whole Q&A before I meet anybody. I try not to, but.
Yeah. I can see now from dealing with narcissists and digging into learning more about it and just that whole pain web, I can spot a narcissist a mile away. And women and not only men, I could spot it just in all different, not even with relationships, just other people when they talk about somebody or how they're trying to get, hooked in a relationship. And business, I've heard people talk about it in business, and
it happens
just like these minors. Yes, it's crazy. They're very
one against another. And the thing is, when you are explaining your story, a lot of times I just sounded hysterical and crazy because it was like, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Where a narcissist will then step back and be really calm and be like, oh, it's just nuts, which makes you feel, you really do start to feel nuts. And one of the things that was happening with me is autoimmune disease is invisible illnesses. So I look fine, right? But I'm not fine. I'm fine now, but if I'm not, I won't show up to things, even a Zoom call. And he continually tells our kids and anybody who will listen that I make it up, even though I get chemo infusions. His theory is Jill bullies doctors into giving her medicine. So that's who cares that he says that? Except he says it with a straight face in court in front of the same judges in small town where I have to go before his colleagues and I have no choice. And he's prevailed on some issues that he really shouldn't have. And the judge won't necessarily find it that way, but they'll find other things, because if he is so firm about something and they know him, and he's like, this is what happened, this is what's happening. She's projecting her illness onto our kids. This is a big one, which is Munchausen's by proxy, which I don't have and have never been diagnosed with and can't be proven. But he'll still tell anybody that. And so you feel like the hardest part with a narcissist is to disengage and not feel like you have to defend yourself. Because as soon as you start defending yourself, especially outside of a courtroom, but even inside of a courtroom, if there's no medical proof, you're done. And I would overtalk and prove myself, and even to my own children, like, you believe me, right? You believe me, it's crazy. And that's the crazy making piece. And I think I just needed to believe in myself, and that took me really, really a lifetime, really, to figure that out, to understand codependency on another human, or even once my mommy role started to seem like it was going to come to an end, now what? You know, could you be codependent on your children? Could you be, I think anything that you're leaning on doesn't let you be you.
Talk about more about, you just said you needed to believe in yourself. And I think as someone who's becomes, whether they're in a marriage or they just are breaking up in a relationship, when you have to own your own truth and dig deep into your own stuff. I know we were talking earlier, and he was talking about how he started the podcast and how he intentionally just wanted to just vent. And until he really stepped back and realized it had to have a good purpose, a good objective. And you just mentioned you had to believe in yourself. And from my own personal experience, you know, self-confidence is a superpower that you go into a whole different realm of like yourself, and you become to identify with really like looking back outside the window and really looking at, okay, what does this look like? Because you just said, you know, you start realizing like, I can't engage with him. Like coming up with these scenarios, like that's a narcissist. That's all they want. They just, it's like a bad little dog. They don't care how bad, what attention they get, as long as it's attention. And so that's what I call narcissists. They're like bad little dogs. They just want attention, and they will go to any extreme to get the attention. And
with the theory, I thought that a long time ago, and I used to have two mindsets. I would, to get something done in my marriage, I would tell him something else, like throw a bone this way so I could be this way. It was mentally exhausting. It's like raising a child.
Yeah.
And then you're right, they want the attention, good, bad, or indifferent. Even if, you know, they're flipping out, that's where they're getting the energy from. And it was really hard to find myself. I had no idea who I was. I live in a place that's not a good fit for me, and my family's not around. You know, the weather, my personality is not a good fit for people that are super quiet. It's a very small town, but my kids have been here. So it's like, how do I find time for me? And if I was to go or travel or spend half time here, am I letting my kid down? And there's all that guilt, because it's like, if I'm not a mommy, who am I? And that's what really happened.
So that was the shift for you.
Yeah, that was a shift.
I think that's a huge shift for so many parents who go through the divorce process, right? As you come out and you have no identity. And a lot of times I think, you know, like self-love, that's the challenge for all of us, right? It's like you go through a divorce, and whatever the catalyst for that divorce is, there's that like, I'm no longer lovable. And we end up in that place where it's like, do I love myself? And if you don't know how to love yourself, how do you begin to love other people? And it becomes a pretty vicious cycle. You mentioned Codependent No More, which I love that book, but Getting the Love That You Want by Harville Hendrix is another one that I'd highly recommend. And we can put that in the show notes. You know, really talking about how do you emerge from the pain and sorrow of a failed marriage, a failed relationship, and begin to rebuild by understanding that the first person you have to love is yourself. And I think we've talked a lot about that on the show, but this is great, right? Because we see a lot of divorce end as a result of what we'll call narcissism or some other, you know, mental condition. And then how does someone reemerge into society as, you know, a person who loves themselves and then can trust other people too? Because that's a challenge, right? I think narcissists rob people of their ability to trust others. And so you're like as you said, I can spot a narcissist a mile away, and that's a great skill, but then
it's a great skill. It's bad.
It's a superpower, but there's also a lot of freaking narcissists out there. So
Right. Like when I say, all right, I'm ready, like, where is he fall out of the sky? Yeah, it's not like people aren't falling out of the sky. It's like, no. Like, so now I'm probably too picky. Now I'm, you know, I'm in a small town, so it's not as many choices, but even so, it's me like, is there an angle to this? So it took me a while to realize that normal people or emotionally stable people don't have an angle to everything. Like, people just have life. And that took some time. My best resource was, it's a website. Her name is MelanieToniaEvans.com. And she is absolutely phenomenal. I want to credit her really with saving my life. She's a woman out of Australia, and she has an internationally famous podcast and workbooks and all this kind of stuff that you can do that talks about, her theory isn't just, oh, poor me. It's not victim mentality at all. It's why were you a match for the narcissist? Because some people will just walk on by and not put up with that. Day one of bullshit, they'll be gone. Or even within a narcissistic situation, so say somebody's putting you down and they're just being, mean and on purpose. If it doesn't bother you, it wouldn't work. Like one of the things he would say is, you're not even that pretty. You just try and hang around with people that are not pretty so that you look better. And
ouch.
Yeah. But the thing is, that didn't actually happen, because between the two of us, I was like, okay. I mean, I don't really like hold myself out as anything, I didn't care. So that one, even though you guys are saying out, just didn't hurt me. I knew it was mean and I thought it was a shitty thing to say, but it didn't hurt me. So it didn't go anywhere. That narcissistic approach didn't go anywhere because I didn't crack because I didn't care, because it just sounded stupid. Making fun of my friends, making fun of me, and you married me. What's wrong with you?
So he should hold themselves accountable to what are their triggers? Why is it triggering you?
Right. So it goes back to your own childhood usually. I mean, there's a whole saying about how you have to relive your own childhood mistakes. So my parents had a bitter divorce, and I tried so hard not to marry the same person as my dad. And I did, but different type of narcissist. But I was still attracted to that very intense personality. And I didn't know what love looked like. I thought love looked like sweep you off your feet, come rescue you from I don't know what, buying flowers, buying jewelry. To me, love looks a lot more like, hey, I bought you your favorite granola, or I knew you needed a ride somewhere. Are you okay? I didn't know that without all the trappings that this is what love looks like: steady, calm, not wildly up and down with the emotion. So it took me a lot.
We talk so much about young love, right? And I think, everyone talks about Romeo and Juliet, and we've somehow forgotten that's a cautionary tale.
Yes, it is.
That's, people always talk about Shakespeare's great romance of Romeo and Juliet. That's a tragedy. It's the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet. Like, they end up fucking dead at the end. Like let's acknowledge that. Like,
it's depression, suicidal, codependency, desperation, it's all that. But I really think the movies continue to perpetuate it. As much as they try not to, there's a lot of door slamming and running after somebody.
Oh my God.
It's the grandiose moments, right? Like, it's got to be grandiose. And it's like, whatever happened to just the simple, I hear what you're saying. I understand you. I won't validate you as a person. We don't have to fight. Let's communicate. Like,
Right. And you matter. So it's more like everybody's going to be a little different than you. Everybody's going to be a pain in the ass sometimes. I'm a pain in the ass. But it's like, if I matter to you, then the things that matter to me, you'll take into account. And, we make it work together through, communication, love languages, different things. And then some things you can agree to disagree on, but never do you need to slam out, kick things around, throw a fit, rev the car, the sports car off. It's like,
what if you have a Tesla? Does that work?
He did not have Tesla. He's got like Jaguar version, but it's still it's the peel out of the driveway effect with the neighbors watching. And I used to go after him early on. And one of the things way before we even moved here that I started really noticing is he would slam out. We'd have an argument, and I will get heated. I'm not Latina, but I am Jewish, and it's like that intense person. I'm Jewish from Long Island, and I will get really pissed. But then I'll diffuse. It's the slamming out, and then once you've slammed out, while I'm just calming down, he'll call from the car to keep it going. Because he didn't get any attention, and now he's up the street. That kind of thing I was engaging in. And so I can't allow that when I date other people. So one thing I don't put up with is lying. And I recently just ended a relationship that was pretty good because I caught him for the second time in a lie by omission, where they think, oh, well, you didn't ask me, so I didn't need to say anything. Yeah, that's still a lie. So
you hear me like puff and puff over here only because I have a twin brother, and I've seen him grow up, and I've seen him talk about, I've seen all the lies.
Right.
So I'm like a professional to spot the bullshit. But I would really love to talk about someone who struggles with an autoimmune disease, who looks the part as a fitness model and looks super healthy.
Oh my goodness.
I do struggle with that So
I do not look super healthy. You're just
well, I wanted to mention because you said that your ex was mentioning that you're pretending. And so as someone who struggles with an autoimmune disease and then being in a relationship where you have to like grin and bear it, right? Well, whatever's going on, as someone that you were, taking care of the kids, and then while he's running the business, you're struggling with not only your identity, a new mom, your own health issues.
my own health issue. Yeah.
Did you ever find yourself like pretending you were always okay with your health?
Oh my God. Oh my God. Fell off the chair.
Yeah.
You are my soul sister here. Yes. All the time. Yeah. And that happens a lot with invisible illnesses. I mean, diabetes is an invisible illness. It doesn't happen with, but things like, I started off with ulcerative colitis. It's like Crohn's disease. It's a very similar disease. It's not IBS, it's an IBD. It just happens to be limited to your large intestine. And so what would happen is I'd have these like, have you ever like gone for a run or given birth? But for Evan, like gone for a run, we get that.
No, I haven't. It's pretty much to both of those.
It's like a labor pain or like that intense muscle cramp that you get where it's a spasm. That's what'll happen. And then it can go away and come back and go away and come back and go away. So I was already doubting myself. I didn't have a diagnosis for a little while. I got it in law school a few months before I met my ex-husband. And he was good when it was like I was sick and cramping and like in the bathroom. He was good with that. But then there's the component of like, why am I so tired? Why can't I get it together? And then I couldn't keep any weight on. I was never overweight, but I was the size 0 suits, the women's suits for work were spinning around me and people were like, you look good. My mother was like, why do I see your collarbone? I don't like seeing your collarbone. Why am I looking at your rib cage, and I just couldn't keep weight on. And that was a very difficult time because he and I were still very much a couple. And I was doubting my sanity as it came and went. The infusion medication was not around then. There wasn't much you could do, but I did take whatever was available. And
that was in the mid-90s, right?
Excuse me?
That was in the mid-90s, right? Like when you first got your diagnosis?
Yeah, I was diagnosed in 1990. So,
yeah, and I think that, and I certainly am not, defending him at all, but it's interesting because a lot of those diseases, especially in the early 90s, fibromyalgia, autoimmune disease,
right.
They were silent. Most doctors didn't have a clue that those existed. And right. Even my mom had fibromyalgia and same thing. It's like years of fatigue and couldn't get a decent diagnosis and doctors like, it's all in your head. And finally doctor said, it's fibromyalgia. And I remember she'd tell me that and I'm like, I didn't believe her, right? Because it was one of those things I had to go back years later and be like, you're right, I'm an ass, I'm sorry.
Right.
But at a time when you were going through this, there just wasn't the medical knowledge to know what.
So the medical knowledge, I did get diagnosed with fibromyalgia later on. It's a big catch-all, but the way it came on for me was fast and furious. I was bleeding. I was cramping in the bathroom, sweating, laying on the floor. I mean, there was no mistaking I was sick. Plus there were physical symptoms. So I was diagnosed right away with it. What to do about it was the issue.
Yeah.
Because it came and went. And my attitude was, I don't have time to be sick. Like, I got to go to law school. I remember being in the medical school across the way, like needing an IV or something with my torts book, reading through my law stuff while the nurses are there. Like, we don't want to see these med mal books. So it wasn't that wasn't believable, but yes, if he didn't see the physical signs, he would say that. And I didn't want it to be there either. But I would say things were happening. Like, I would come back from lunch, say, and then I might feel really sick. And I had like access to a handicapped bathroom, but I'd be really tired. And I would literally lay on the floor of the bathroom floor of the public restroom in my law firm. I didn't own it. It was a bigger law firm, in my suit, and lay down on my purse and be like, I have to take a nap. I don't even have the energy to get out of the bathroom.
Wow.
And when I told him that, I didn't really tell anybody that. It was so weird and so shameful. His response was, I think you're just stressed out at work. So not that he was a doctor either, but between the two of us, it was like, nobody was like, yeah, you have a problem. We need to get you talking to the doctor about that. So I ended up having severe weight loss where you could see my heart through my chest, and I looked anorexic. I mean, I guess I was, but I didn't have the psychological point of view, but I was wasting. And eventually I had a very radical surgery where I had to have the whole large intestine thrown out. You can't get an organ transplant. And I have a J pouch where they've taken the small intestine and reconnected, and I look normal. But during those times, he was really horrible too, because I had the 2 kids and I went in for surgery. And I remember him arguing with the doctor saying that I should be trying yoga and I don't try hard enough. I should try supplement. I mean, at this point, the intestine ruptured when they took it out. It was awful. So that kind of mentality, leaving me alone in the hospital, just like left. I'm glad my mom was there. Just those kind of things that were just purposely cruel, that clearly I couldn't make it up. A doctor's not going to just cut you open, take out an organ because you told them to. Yeah. That doesn't make sense. So things got rougher. And as I recovered from that, my body kept raging. I was supposed to be better. And I'm better in a lot of ways, but I ended up getting a weird arthritis that goes with colitis. Fibromyalgia is one of the catch-alls. So now they understand a lot better that your body is autoimmune and may just continue to attack and find different places to attack. And so one of the things about living here that's really hard is the lack of vitamin D, because I really need that.
You gotta get a red light in your house.
Okay. Yeah.
It's bad for you, but
tanning bed?
They say tanning beds are really bad for you.
Tanning bed doesn't give you the right light, the right ray.
No.
It doesn't. And the bright light doesn't either. It only just makes you not feel like sad during the winter. So every time I can, I just go into the sun. I notice I'm so much better in the sun. You know, just even just laying there and absorbing it and the vitamin D and processing calcium and stuff. And then I can feel better and I'm not so fatigued all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we're all solar charged.
Yeah, this is like such a crazy time, but I think that your story is like phenomenal as far as you have all these titles. So I want to go back to, after you found your identity, did you just start adding onto your resume because you're like, okay, now my kids are older, I can do anything now and everything?
No, I wish I did. I was more like, what am I going to do with myself? I'm not making enough money in Vermont. And then like one day I'm like, because I gave up several of my law licenses except for one state because I wasn't practicing and I was sick and there's a lot of fees. And then I swear to God, one day I'm driving and I thought, you have a law degree. It's like it came out of the sky. Yeah, you have a law degree. You can do this. You can write. My mom's a super fan of mine. And she's always like, you're always changing hats just to make things work for you. Because I was super excited to be on your show. And like, I have no idea where they found me. But I actually had to go back when I was talking to Katya and figure out what I did. She asked me for a resume. I wasn't sure. I had to go through and be like, oh yeah, I wrote a book and I did this and I did that. I feel like I love having all the education, and right now I am a college application coach, which is not a great field right now. I think it will be again, but not right now. But just having the intelligence and being able to write well and understand kids and understand people, and even this narcissistic journey has really made me understand how people work. Mm-hmm. I didn't really understand how people work, like at all.
So I think we're all hitting an age where I think experience is catching up to us. Is that an experience thing? I mean,
I think so.
So. What's the best advice you can give someone who is a newly single person and kind of navigating life? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. Just someone who's just navigating. Dealing with someone who was a narcissist or someone who was, and they're trying to, find themselves right now and they're in this quarantine world where they're like, what do I do with my hands? Like, what's the best advice?
Well, it is masturbation month.
It's like almost better for that sort of situation because you can't meet up right away, which means you can have more meaningful conversations before you're meeting up. And then, so for me, I mean, there has to be chemistry too, but I'm not the type of person, and maybe this is age also, that's just like, oh, he's cute, that looks good. It's a much more emotional connection for me. But it has to be chemical too. It's not going to be anybody. And I find that, this is the advice. I knew this advice when I got separated. I jumped right into a relationship I wasn't ready for, and it didn't work out. But because my thing was, well, I'll just find another boyfriend, especially if you've always been with someone. I was in my parents' house. I was in college. I was in law school. I was with my ex-husband. And then I jumped right into a long-term boyfriend, like a year and a half, thinking, I need a guy in my life. And it's such a hard thing to do, to be like, I don't need anybody. And for men too, like, I don't have to have a girlfriend to feel great. I don't have to have anybody. That sucks because it's lonely. And your brain tells you kind of do need somebody. And I think you guys talk about the suck, like going through the sucky period, like you have to go through the suck. That's what it is, where it's like, I need to find myself. I don't even know where to start. So my starting points for a narcissistic relationship, I can text you the MelanieToniaEvans.com. It was super helpful to me. The Codependent No More book. I have another book right here. That was my Bible. And it's called the Anxiety Phobia Workbook. And it's not mine, but I'll send you, I can send you a link to it. And it's a workbook, so it engages with, like, usually if you can't believe in yourself, you're anxious somehow. And it's a workbook where if you don't have agoraphobia or whatever spiders is, right? Arachnophobia, you don't have to go through that part of the book. But there's the generalized anxiety. You really start to recognize yourself in it. And then they ask questions, and then it asks you about your life to fill in blanks. And then using the reframed mindset, how can you change your life? So for example, I'm never going to be able to do this changes to I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work to do that. It's like homework. So once I realized, after the first boyfriend I broke up, I spent a very long time by myself with my kids. Like, I have just got to figure out what I want. I don't want somebody else telling me what I want. And that's sort of what my marriage was. Me looking around.
I think a really important thing that you just said is I think the best advice I can give someone who is starting over, whether it's a marriage or just life in general, is to really sit in your own shit, first of all, like you said.
Exactly.
But you have to like be by yourself. But I forgot what I was gonna say. But it's like, besides starting over and really being by yourself, the best advice I can give is to really just kind of like you have to know what you want, but you have to, more importantly, know what you don't want.
Absolutely.
Right? Everyone always talks about that list of, I want him to be this, and I want this. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a partner. It's like, what do you want with your life? What do you want with your friendships? What do you want with your job? What kind of relationships do you want? Yeah. And what don't you want? That's the list that I tell like everyone to focus on, more importantly. When starting over, make a list of the shit you don't want. Like,
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And it's unusual for me to, end something because I caught someone in a lie. Like that wasn't who I used to be. I used to be like, okay. And I even went back with him for a while, and okay, I'll still help out. We're still great and whatever. And now you're going to be transparent. And it doesn't even have to be about cheating. It's just like cheating physically. It's just the lying. So what I don't want, what I can't tolerate is lying. And so does that mean that when it happens and it's hard to say, I can't have you in my life anymore, do you betray yourself? Because I used to betray myself all the time. But instead,
well, that's the young person's game, right? Because as you get older, you're like, in the beginning, like, oh, I'm okay, it'll get better, and then you get to that point, you're like, hell no. Yeah. Like, no, that's the line in the sand, and you cross the line, and it sucks because I valued this relationship. I was invested in it. I wanted it, but I can't do it.
Yeah. Right. But you value more. And that's the big thing that I didn't used to do. Like, well, what am I going to do without him? Where am I going to be without him? Maybe I can overlook. Maybe I can twist the picture instead of being like, there's the line in the sand. I would rather be alone than compromise any more of my integrity. And that took me a long, long time. I will say with my own children and the way they like talk to me or even talk back to me or, whatever, I've really tried to instill in them, don't be getting married at 22, which is not a great thing across the board to say, but just, your brain's not even developed yet. And B, you don't need to compromise on yourself. And so I feel like I've given them those lessons, but not so much myself.
No, that's parenting, right? Do as I say, not as I do.
Right. But you know what got me, the big thing that made me leave my marriage was, would I want this for my child? And the answer was no.
Yeah, crazy, because decision makers have always been, would I be okay if my daughter was going through this? And that's sad that we have to like reconsider our own stuff. You know,
yeah, but kids are great that way. They're that ultimate. I talk about Don Quixote a lot, but they're the Don Quixote mirror, right? Like they show us how big of schmucks we can be.
Pretty much.
Like,
it's so true.
And you think about it like, oh God, you know, if my daughter were going through this, would I be okay with it? And the answer is like, hell no, you wouldn't be okay with it.
I know.
And then when you're participating in it and you're allowing it, especially in a marriage, because you want to keep the family intact, right? You don't want to have divorce, and there's that piece of it. And it's not even so much a stigma, because I haven't felt stigmatized being a single mom. It's more that nobody gets married to get divorced, and it's a big deal. And but then I thought, do I want my daughter watching and thinking this is love? Do I want my son thinking this is an okay way to treat a woman? And no, I did not. So those were the catalysts that really pushed me through. And then it's weird, because once you start liking yourself again, you can find things to do. It's like, oh yeah, I used to like to craft, or I have written a children's book and not a series. Oh yeah, like you're right, go back. And so that is part of this writing, and this Lessons from the Minivan is sort of where I free flow my thoughts into the universe, and find a lot of other people saying me too. And that's really great for, what helps.
And that's fantastic. And Lessons from the Minivan is hilarious. It's heartfelt. It's sad. It's funny. It's all things that are single parenting. It's all things that are life. So I would highly recommend you guys check that out. I think you guys keep talking about something that I wrote about, I think about a year ago in one of our blog posts, but I called it the divorce bucket list. Because I think, there's things that we don't do in our marriage that we want to. And whether it's because that's the sacrifice for the marriage, it's this, where our partner doesn't want to do it, whatever it is. And so one of the things after I stopped being a post-divorce asshole and started really doing the work on myself, it's like, oh, what are the 10 things that I want to do that I didn't do during my marriage? And that was it, right? Because then all of a sudden you find out, well, these are things that I like. And then they open up doors to meet people. And so it's no longer the desperation of, trying to find a relationship or being with someone. It's the recognition that, oh, I love myself. I love my hobbies. I love who I am. And in such, the universe just opens up the door. I'm like, here's a whole slew of people that you can hang out with. And you don't have to be afraid that you're going to be alone or that people aren't going to accept you. It's just when you are who you are after going through all that work, it's like, you recognize ultimately, it's like me, don't like me, I don't give a shit, because guess what? I love me.
I don't give a shit either. But it is, I think that having your own interests makes you a better partner in a relationship, rather than that enmeshed, we have to do everything together. We're going to live here near my family. You can't see your friends. I know your story a little bit.
Codependency, right?
Well, I think it creates you're attracted to that, because that's what initially brings people together. Right. So what happens is most narcissists like to control you, and then they're not attracted to you after a while because they took all that away from you.
Yes, they took all your energy, all your light, basically.
And also
Emotional Vampires, Energetic Vampires.
I read that book, by the way, Emotional Vampires. There's a book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
I need to get that one.
It's a really good
There's going to be a lot of books in this show notes. Katya!
Yeah, well, it's nice to find resources that work. I recently read Codependent No More, because I started realizing that I needed to, my kids were still kids, and I needed to, since a lot of my friends moved, I needed to find something else to do with myself. And I didn't realize you could be codependent on anything. It's not just a spouse. It could be your children, your position at work, all this. I've read it so much that half the book has fallen out. It's highlighted, it's underlined. I have to put it down. I'm exhausted, halfway through a page. And it's like, yes, 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 this is me, this is me. And it teaches you how to get out of it, because when you're codependent, you're also sick. And it does talk about alcoholism, but I think it applies to so many of us that have just fallen into these relationships that, our parents didn't discuss these things openly with us, where they sit us down and be like, avoid this and don't go for that. And so this generation is a lot more open. I'm more open with my children, and hopefully the cycles will break.
That's interesting. I didn't think of it like that.
Well, it's just the awareness, right? It's acknowledgement is the first step towards recovery. If we want to break the cycles for our kids, it's acknowledging like, okay, this is a problem. Now we fix it.
Yeah.
Now he needs to follow the guy and be perfect.
What was that?
I said, now I'm like, okay, now my perfect person that's going to accept me just as I am, but be perfect for me, will fall out of the sky. Because that's work too. It's work to find what you like in life, or the right person, or the person that you want to spend a lot of time with. It really is work, and you have to put that in too. And it doesn't feel like it should be work. But if it's like, oh, I kind of like him, and then just settle for that, I don't think kind of is good enough. Anyway, not for me anymore.
I think your person is gonna fall from the sky, and the reason I say that is because it's gonna fall on your path. You can't look for that person. You can't.
Right.
You can't. I think dating apps are the worst thing ever, because they essentially like are creating that expectations, exactly. And it's like, well, you said on the list you were this person.
It's also this too. It's like people go into dating apps because they have an expectation of meeting someone, and so that forced expectation allows you to lower the standard of what you're willing to, that line in the sand. It's like, well, I'm here because I need to find someone, not because I want to find someone. And what we ultimately forgot is that relationships are work, and it's the work that makes them great, right? Like intimacy grows with work. It grows with the challenge. It grows with all that we put into it, and people have become very flippant about relationships and very disposable, right? And to that extent, I mean, like, I don't know if I agree or disagree with this, but if you put everything into the relationship, if you grow in intimacy and you actually do the work that you need to do and it doesn't work out, then you can walk away, and that's that fist bump at the end, right? Like, hey, we had fun, we gave it a good whirl. It's like,
I have one of those. He's amazing. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But the inherent problem is that, we become so immune to the work ethic that causes successful relationships. So when things get challenging, it's like swipe left, swipe right. It's like I've got a million different resources to distract me from the reality that I need to work on a relationship. And that's the inherent problem, right?
And your goals can be very, very different online dating. I mean, people will put themselves out there like, I do want a long-term relationship, but they don't, but they want to attract somebody that wants a long-term relationship. You know what I mean? It's like the quality of the person you want to attract and where they are might be different. So, I mean, I definitely feel like it'd be better to meet, when people meet organically, like you said, like doing hobbies and going out, and plus maybe coupling it with the dating apps. I got a job once from a dating app. I mean, it didn't work out with him, but I ended up doing something.
I think the dating apps are like, it's entertaining. You're probably just entertaining yourself. But the person for you is as smart as you are. It's going to be someone who is on your path and attracts the stuff that you're doing currently, because they're going to like you for you.
You guys know, all the listeners, I was paid by Bumble to explore the single parent dating.
I saw that.
Okay, on Bumble, that's fun.
It's a month of my life I'll never get back, but it's,
I can only imagine. I would not. I don't. Yeah. No. I literally, after I was engaged for I was in a relationship for 3 years, and I was engaged and broke it off, started all over, completely over. And I was single for a whole year, where I was just like, didn't go on any dates, didn't do anything, and it was literally the best thing I ever did, because it just made me realize more of not only what I want, what I don't want, because I was dating myself. Like I was like, I'm going to buy myself dinner and buy myself a bottle of wine, and just do things I wanted to do.
Definitely. I think that, and the don't want list is really important, because, I mean, one of the things is I want to move to a sunnier place. So getting involved with someone that has their roots here is not the greatest idea, because it's not going to, I don't want to end up being like, oh, okay, I'll be here, because I'd be miserable. It's just not a good fit, and that's just a location. But there's personality things you may not want. You may not want a workaholic, or you may want a workaholic. You may not want someone it used to be important to me to date someone that also had kids. Now, as I'm phasing out, I'm not sure how important that is, but I wonder, because it's like, if you've never even had that experience of having kids, I don't know if that's still a no, but it was for a little while. And it just,
I would probably say that in a certain age demographic, if you've never had kids, you know, maybe even never been married, you're probably a
never
narcissist.
married. Get it? No, I can't.
Yeah.
They never get married.
Like, if you're above 35 and you've never been married and have kids, you know, like there's narcissism galore there. That would be a red flag for me.
Or you're a baby. You know, you may not be a narcissist. You can be like another person I need to raise, and I already raised 3 and my ex-husbands. No, thank you. I
want to think back to their childhood too, because I have a cousin who is single. She'd never been married, never had kids, but she also, her mom was in and out of the house a lot, so she helped her raise her siblings. And so I think a lot of it and her relationships, you know, she just chooses not to have kids because she didn't have a childhood. So, but she works, does a great job.
Well, and that's the interesting, like, because there's a generational shift right now where more and more of the younger generation are choosing not to get married, not to have kids. But, you know, of our generation, you know, 40 plus, there is, you know, that's definitely still within that realm of, you know, 35, 40, never been married, never have kids. There's something, to me, it would be a red flag.
Yeah, something that's a little off. Yeah.
They've never been married, or at least a common law type of marriage where it's, you know, you don't. That's a big red flag to me. You never live with anybody. You don't know how to. I mean, one thing about being a parent is you definitely learn how to share, whether you like it or not. They're in your food, they're in your stuff, they're in your makeup, they're in your time, they're in your, you know, whatever, and you share, and things roll off your back. I don't see myself or anybody really being a great match with, you're right, somebody in his 40s that has just been alone and, you know, casually dated throughout, because I don't think we'd be on the same page. I used to feel that way about kids, and I'm not sure so much now because my kids are older, and I felt that way only because they were such a big part of my life that if he didn't understand, it would be a problem.
Right.
But
it's
so
different now. It's like rechecking your love language, because my love languages change every year.
What's your love?
I'm gonna put quality time down a little bit more now that we're in quarantine. But with your life, your kids in school, and now they're practically almost adults except the 14-year-old. You know, kids are not a priority. So maybe you should do your list where you're like checking it out. And you're like, this is the number. Rate them. Like, is a priority more of a 10 priority, and anything below an 8 is a hell no.
Oh, that's so good. That's such a good idea. I'll tell you, and this is probably
it's like clothes. You know how you put the hanger this way, and if you didn't wear it the whole year, that means you gotta chuck it.
But don't you guys know, like,
take your word for that.
He was like, what just happened here?
Well, or like, do you have a car? Do you have a job? I mean, in my mind, it's like, what? What do you mean, do you have a car? Do you have a job? I mean, unless you live in a city where you don't need a car. If you don't have a car or a job or something at this age, like that's a hell no. But I don't even want that to be in my standards. So when people are first getting out there, this is what they run into. And I realize right now people are laid off, so I shouldn't say it during this period of time. But if you have had a job, if you used to have one reason.
Yeah.
If you've been unemployed for 2 years, but you know, and again, it's like that's part and parcel of this idea that people feel like they need a relationship, that they don't want one, right? Like, you should not be in a relationship if you don't have a job, if you don't have a car. It's like, it's Maslow's hierarchy of basic human needs. It's like, fill that bottom rung first, fix your shit, be a responsible adult, and then go date.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I did is feeling like everybody's mommy, and it could be empath, is like, oh, well, he needs my help and I can help him. So it's like fixing somebody else or taking their problems on too, which you can do in a loving, intact relationship where you're a team. But I was doing it even with dating, even with people I knew I wouldn't want to be with. I was like, oh, I'll help you. And that was spending so much of my time and energy. It makes no sense to be almost too nice. I don't know if that sounds silly.
No, I think that's common, and I think we see that a lot with people, you know, post-divorce, or, you know, especially with narcissists. Like, it's like then you feel important, but then it also forces you to not focus on your own stuff, right?
Right. Like, I know this relationship is going nowhere, but I feel all of a sudden obligated to help you. So that took me a long time to stop feeling obligated to other people that didn't ask. and aren't my children or something I would have an obligation to. There's a lot of work in there. I mean, there really is. And it's fun to just be like, oh yeah, okay, we're over the hump. But those days can be really dark and lots of tears. And so what I do on my site is I say something like my DMs are always open. I answer everybody that reaches out to me. Generally, unless it's creepy, but I answer everybody that is, you get some of that. But my icon is just a little red minivan, so I don't get as many maybe as I would in the DMs. But I do respond to everybody, and people are grateful, and that makes me so happy. Just like, I'm so glad thank you for entertaining us, or thank you because I'm not alone, or thank you for talking to me or giving me a resource. And so I feel like part of my purpose that I enjoy now is helping others not maybe have to go through it for as long as I did. Mm-hmm. Just having resources, because it's one thing to know you have to do the work. It's another thing to do the work.
Yeah.
Because the work sucks.
Work sucks. But it's, we come out so much better on the other side.
So much better. So much better.
I tell my daughter all the time, it's like, first we do what we have to do, so then we can do what we want to do.
Yeah.
And that's, that's true. It's like the work, the work should always be there, whether you're divorced, single, married, happily. It's like, but it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Yes, that's so perfectly said. It's a journey for you, and it's a journey for your relationship. I mean, even within a bad marriage, there's lots of things I could have handled better that I wouldn't ever do again. Just myself, just like the way that I would get mad or upset or hold a grudge, or, that's not the person I want to be, and that's not the direction I want to go in. And that takes a long time to figure out. So the workbooks are helpful, and just sitting in your own shit is helpful. Like, I got to do this. I got to figure this out by myself. And I don't need to be rescued from myself by anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. That helped me a lot.
Jill, I absolutely hate to cut this off.
No, it's okay.
We've run long, but so I guess that means that when conversations like this that flow so effortlessly, we need to have you back on.
I would love.
And so, good, there's so much. There's been we've had a blast. We've had a lot of laughs.
This is fun.
We sat in our own shit for a while. And that's only because I thought I saw a spider.
You might literally forever.
Got in it more than all of us.
Like, you guys talked about it figuratively. I might have been talking about it literally.
I know.
It's actually a good thing I put on pants for the first time today.
I know.
Just saying.
For me, at least.
Welcome to the podcast, Chady.
Hey. Yeah, I know, it's your first day, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for just your wisdom and just being real. It's nice to know that you're so wise, but you're educated, but more than anything, you're authentic and you're real, and you're like telling us like the stuff that a lot of people don't get to talk about. And I think that's why I jumped in on board to be a part of this podcast, but to connect with women like yourself and people who just really are speaking their truth and just like, hey, I'm an attorney. I have these titles, but this is the stuff that I went through, and how it is to be a parent alone on this journey is probably the toughest thing that anybody could own up to.
Absolutely.
So she's an author, she's an attorney, she's a college professor, she's a college admittance application coach, she's a writer. She's all those things.
We're gonna summon somebody. I need a list.
She is Jill. She is Lessons from the Minivan. Jill, thank you so much for being a part of the Single Parent Daily podcast. We can't wait to have you back.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor and so much fun.
Cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Single Parent Daily podcast with your hosts,
Chady Denmark
and Evan DeMarco. Make sure to tune in on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. We can't wait to have Jill back on the show. I think she's actually agreed, at least in verbally, to do some writing on for the blog post as well. So we'll be sharing some of her content as well as all of her information in the show notes. Make sure to share this one with your friends and family. I think there's a lot of great information here. And until next time, we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.